everyone. I would like to tell you a story. Maybe when you were a child, your parents used to tell you a story. But it's not a fairy tale story, it's someone's life story. I used to have a friend. Her name is Sumaya. When the pandemic was going on, everything was shut down, but Sumaya's madrasa was open and she used to go there. Sumaya is from an underprivileged family. So one day, basically, I was just scrolling my Facebook and social medias, and suddenly I saw a post that a girl child need 10 bags of blood, and I also saw that that girl belongs from a neighborhood. So it's really hit me like, who is that girl? So I ran to the hospital. I checked that that girl is my friend Sumaya, and she was raped. Can you imagine how a 10 years old girl is get raped? When I saw Sumaya in the hospital's bed, I saw a body like a without soul. We are saying that we are the best creature on the earth, as like human is the best creature on the earth. Then how human can do this kind of violence to the child? This is my questions to you. Welcome to the Together to End Violence Leaders event. I am the Secretary of National Child Forum in Bangladesh. I'm speaking with and on behalf of those children, those under the age of 18, those lives are being a part thorn right now in our community or the impacts of violence. Childhood is the best part of the every children's life. And when a child became a victim of violence, actually it destroyed. Nobody has rights to destroy someone's childhood. As I shared with you Suma's life story, I saw her pain. I saw her to stay always quiet. I saw her trouble. You, me, and nobody has right actually to destroy someone's childhood. But violence is destroying it. I'm speaking on behalf of those children like me, the activists, leaders of national parliaments and networks, and the millions of children from all corners of the world so that who don't get chance to speak out yet now. My voice is for the voiceless people. I belong to a community where child marriage or child violence is a common issue, where lots of children are getting married at an early age. I could be a victim too, but no, I'm working here now as a fighter and I'm raising my voice for them. But the journey of my advocacy or activist was not so easy. Being a girl, it's too much hard for me to continue my work. Like me, there is lots of girls who are working on those topics and they are also facing same problem. We ask you to help us to continue our journey. We want to grow. We want to see a non-violent world and we want to make this world with your help. You know what? I get courage when I see that people like you are calling us to hear our problems. But don't just hear us problem. We want to hear and our problems to take action and bring a change. You are saying that you are working for us, and yes, obviously we are happy for that. But can you make a specific time for us? At that time, you will have a direct dialogue with us to know our problem and to find out a solution. Because you are saying that child participation is important. I'm speaking out because I have the witness of violence. I'm speaking out because children have the rights to be listened about the issues that affecting our lives. I'm speaking out because we have innovation ideas, we have innovation solution. I'm speaking out today because we have the year of international leaders, but we want their mind and heart. And more than anything, we want their commitment and action to bring change and to end all form of violence. I'm confident that together we can and will end violence. But we need your action and we are here to get involved and help bring about the change we are seeking. We are here so that no girls or no child experience any kind of violence. Together to end violence.
Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished speakers, adult survivors of violence, and children. On behalf of the End Violence Partnership and Board, welcome to the Together to End Violence Leaders event. Dola's remarks were a powerful reminder of why we are coming together today. Put simply, the violence that half of our children experience every year in every country and community around the world must end. I'm inspired to be joined today by leaders across continents and sectors, all united by a shared vision of a world where every girl and every boy grows up in a safe, secure, and nurturing environment. And all of us working together to bring that vision to life, so that children are safe at home, at school, online, and within their community. Right now, humanity is dealing with multiple crises, including COVID-19, climate change, conflicts, and much more. This means that children everywhere are at even greater risk of violence, abuse, and exploitation. Yet, however challenging the context, it is our duty to protect and promote the rights of children. And more than our duty, it is in all of our interest to end violence against children. As we'll hear today, the case for action is clear and it is compelling. We know that violence against children is wrong. We know that it undermines all other investments in their health, education, and development. We know what works to stop it, and we know that it makes economic sense to prevent it. Inaction to protect children is a choice that must be eliminated. To achieve this, we must work together, confidently and relentlessly challenging the status quo, shine a spotlight on the scale and consequences of violence, promote the solutions that we know work, support the courageous children and survivors of violence who are catalyzing change within their own communities, compel sustained action by government, development agencies, private companies, and of course, the public, and unlock the necessary leadership commitments and financial investment. Today's Leaders event is an important moment on our journey, a moment to hear from one of the most diverse and influential groups that has ever come together to advocate for an end to violence against children. A moment to inspire leaders everywhere to take action and invest in children. Let's do all we can to seize this moment with and for children everywhere. It is now my great pleasure to hand over to Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, who is joining us from the UN headquarters in New York.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, 6 years ago, the Secretary General joined global leaders and youth advocates to launch the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children. Today, it is the only global entity focused solely on SDG 16.2, ending the scourge of violence against children. And thanks to the partnership, we have much to celebrate. Legislative reform has been enacted around the world, providing more children with comprehensive legal protection from corporal punishment and online abuse. Dozens of countries have developed national plans to bring evidence-based prevention interventions to scale. And millions more children experiencing violence are being reached by services to prevent recurrence and support healing and justice. But our work is far from complete. Over this same period, we have experienced several setbacks. Children and women have been at heightened risk of violence and abuse during the COVID-19 pandemic. And new armed conflicts around the world remind us that those who pay the greatest cost for these conflicts are the most vulnerable. Children. More than 1.5 million children have fled Ukraine since the beginning of the war, and they are at heightened risk of human trafficking and exploitation. My friends, we must do better. Doing better means first and foremost placing children's rights and well-being front and centre of the 2030 Agenda. Only by breaking the intergenerational cycle of violence and deprivation can we achieve sustainable development. Second, doing better means recognising that tackling violence against children is a necessary precondition to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Violence in childhood negatively impacts virtually all other goals, from health and education to poverty and gender equality. And third, doing better means that the level of political and financial commitment to this issue actually matches the scale of the violence that is faced by children. Every year, violence impacts every second child in the world, and we need to step up our collective efforts and investments accordingly. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, violence against children is not inevitable. As this partnership has shown, time and time again, we can make progress. Let's continue working together to end violence against children, for countries, and for our world.
A very warm welcome to participants joining us from over 135 countries for today's Together to End Violence Leaders event. And thank you, Amina, for your opening remarks, highlighting the important progress that we are all making together, but at the same time, making it clear that we do have much work ahead of us. The Together to End Violence campaign was launched by the End Violence Partnership to raise awareness, share solutions, and catalyse commitments to end all violence and abuse of children. And today's event is the culmination of 18 months of collective advocacy and action all over the world. During the next 2 hours, we will be informed and I'm sure inspired by children and adult survivors of violence and abuse, by heads of government, royalty, leaders of multinational institutions, foundations, civil society, and faith-based organisations. They will each share their perspectives, the progress they see, the plans they have, and commitments they are making to play their part in ending violence against children. Simultaneous translation is available in French and Spanish by clicking the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. You can also follow live updates on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And when you hear something from one of our speakers that is powerful and resonates with you, please do post on social media using the hashtag #EndViolence. Please also feel free to make comments, share relevant links, ask questions in the chat box as we go. The event is being recorded, it's being streamed live on YouTube, and we'll make it available on the End Violence website and on social media. The event will consist of 3 parts. First, the current global context. Second, solutions and actions taking place right now to end violence against children. And third, the final part, delivering a compelling call to action of what needs to happen next. We stand at a critical moment for children everywhere. And our opening speakers will focus on this current global context. They'll provide us with a clear set of recommendations of what they see needs to be done and done with urgency to accelerate progress to end all forms of violence against children. Let's get going. It is now my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Najat Maalla, the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General on Violence Against Children. She'll set the scene, she'll make the case for urgent investment.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear children, the urgency for investing in an effective protection of all children from all forms of violence in all settings is more relevant than ever worldwide. First, too many children worldwide are still left behind. Across the world, progress in the protection of children has been slowed or even reversed by the pandemic and the ongoing humanitarian crisis. The pandemic has increased violence against children, both offline and online, including domestic violence, sexual exploitation, child labor, child marriage. Millions of children forcibly displaced due to armed conflict, food insecurity, and environmental degradation are more likely to be victims of child trafficking, sexual exploitation, forced labor, enrollment of children in armed and criminal groups, or go missing along these dangerous journeys. Second, huge toll is paid by children and societies. Child victims of violence are experiencing severe and long-lasting mental health problems. Child victims of violence may not reach their full education and health potential, which will limit their future productivity and impact the human capital development. A huge financial toll is paid by its victims and societies. One study suggested these costs could be as high as 8% of world GDP. This is a waste of trillions of US dollars each year. Third, investing in child protection is needed more than ever. We must see spending on child and gender-sensitive protection and violence prevention across all services as a key investment with high returns and long-term cost savings. Investing in child protection and violence prevention should be an integral part of every government's overall economic growth and development strategy. Fourth, children are key partners and must be seen as part of the solution. Children worldwide, including the most vulnerable, are taking action in addressing violence against children, gender-based violence, climate change, poverty, mental health, social discrimination, among others. They are leading the way with creative initiative and involvement in decision-making processes. We need to listen, involve, and empower them more and more. Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear children, protecting all children cannot wait. We know how to do it. We must do it with and for children. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Lena Hallengren and I'm Minister for Health and Social Affairs in the Swedish government. I'm also responsible for issues regarding the rights of the child in the government. So, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, although it has been said many times before, it deserves to be said over and over again. Our children and young people are our future, our pride and joy. They come into this world as innocent babies, free of prejudices and preconceived notions. And most of the things that happen to them in their later years are due primarily to how they have been treated during their upbringing and what they've been taught by adults. Children tend to imitate and pattern themselves after the adults in their lives. It goes without a saying that we, the adult generation, have a huge responsibility to care for children and young people, to keep them safe, to give them love, to educate them and to teach them about good values, their rights and the world. Children, when they grow up, are to a great extent products of their upbringing, and generally, children who grow up in a loving and nursing setting with values such as dignity, fairness, equality, respect and independence keep and lives through values as adults. I know that we all share the same view that all violence and abuse of children is unacceptable. Despite the clear goal that no child should be violated or abused, many children are still affected, and the amount of affected has increased even more with ongoing conflicts, COVID-19 and climate-related catastrophes. Not being able to protect children from violence is nothing but a failure for our society. We must do better to protect all children from violence in all its forms, to protect young girls from child marriage, children from human trafficking and slavery. We must end violence in and through schools so children are free to learn, thrive and pursue their dreams. We must do more and better to protect and help especially all those children who are in the most vulnerable situations. The ones who have nothing, neither resources nor relatives who care for them. I wish there was a silver bullet for achieving a world free from violence against children, but there isn't. It's said that it takes a whole village to raise a child, and I believe that's true. But I'm also convinced that it takes the whole society, the whole international community to end violence against children. We need to work together, states, civil society, private enterprises and organizations, authorities and faith-based organizations to end violence against children. We need to share our good practices as well as failed interventions, and we need to show solidarity when it comes to financing activities that aims to end violence against children. Sweden is proud to be part of the global partnership to end violence against children. We strongly believe in its organization, which brings together stakeholders from all over the world and from all parts of society. The partnership is already showing tangible results, and Sweden is convinced that this partnership is key to end violence against children. Sweden strongly encourages more stakeholders to join the partnership and to all participating stakeholders to help finance the work of the Secretariat and the great interventions that are being carried out. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Miliband, President and CEO of the International Rescue Committee. I'm delighted on behalf of the IRC to submit a few words in support of the End Violence campaign. This is a very important campaign for us because we're living in a time when the number of refugees is rising, the number of internally displaced is rising, both to record levels, more than 100 million people we know now from the UNHCR. When the scale of impunity in war zones around the world is also rising, and therefore the number of children being impacted negatively by conflict and war is rising too. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that we're living through a global public health emergency when it comes to violence against children. Now, the goal of the Sustainable Development Goal 16 to end all violence against children by 2030 is only going to be possible if we specifically focus on the needs of children in fragile and conflict states. Communities in crisis are, in truth, being left behind as the rest of the world improves life chances for children on the basis of peace and prosperity. It's in conflict states that violence against children is rising the fastest, and it's in conflict states that the greatest risk to the Sustainable Development Goal is posed. Children are obviously vulnerable in all communities, but they're especially vulnerable when caught up in crisis. And of course, girls are doubly vulnerable in conflict situations. It's no exaggeration to say that the fate of children in the growing number of fragile and conflict states, after all, there are 55 civil conflicts going on around the world at the moment, 8 of them considered severe, and then there is the Ukraine crisis as well, representing a conflict between states. This all adds up to a dire threat to the goals that were set in 2015 for the Sustainable Development Goals. We see this threat at the International Rescue Committee in all of our country programs, 35 in total, but we are particularly concerned in the areas where we're running child protection programs at the immediate evidence of the damage, direct and indirect, of violence on young lives. The violence can involve physical danger or death, such as the bombing of buildings and schools. It can also involve the psychological trauma, economic exploitation, sexual abuse that goes hand in hand with conflict. Now, direct and physical danger is the most obvious and gets the most news. And it, of course, stands side by side with the indirect and invisible damage that also lasts a lifetime. This is why at the International Rescue Committee, we think about violence against children across the cycle, from prevention to treatment in the home and in the community, and why we think not just about child protection programming, but health programming, education programming, and protection programming as well. In total, we helped around 100,000 young people, children and young people, through our programs last year, dedicated to mitigating or preventing violence. And of course, our education, our health, our gender equality programs help millions more. We've learned a lot about how to make a difference, but we need urgent action on 4 fronts. First, calling out and tackling impunity, actions without consequence, crimes without punishment in war zones, the targeting of civilians, the targeting of civilian infrastructure with the denial of access to aid. Secondly, prevention, not just response, because prevention is critical. Yet the majority of our work that gets funding is on response. We need to fund prevention too. Thirdly, specialized services combined with mainstreaming. We talk about how it takes a village to raise a child, but there's not nearly enough programming aimed at the role of communities impacted by crisis in protecting children from harm. Violence against children, after all, isn't just a children's issue. It's a health issue, an economic issue, a protection issue, a community issue. And fourthly, we need to understand that the multi-year dimensions to violence against children need a multi-year response. They need multi-year funding and multi-year programming that is all too short supply when it comes to humanitarian action in conflict-affected states. This campaign could not be more timely. We're proud to be part of it. We're determined to make a difference, and we look forward to your partnership in doing so. Thank you very much indeed.
Saya ingin menanyakan bagaimana pemerintah dapat menjamin keselamatan anak-anak di rumah. Dari hasil diskusi kami bersama dengan teman-teman dari berbagai daerah, bahkan di tingkat regional, masih banyak kasus kekerasan yang terjadi di rumah. Padahal seharusnya rumah menjadi tempat yang aman bagi anak, tempat anak mendapat dukungan dan perlindungan.
It is an honor for me to address survivors of violence and the distinguished leaders who are sharing commitments to end violence against children. I thank the End Violence Partnership for organizing this important summit. The Global Partnership for Education is the world's largest partnership and fund, dedicated exclusively to bringing a quality education to the most marginalized children. We believe in the power of education to transform children's lives, but we cannot help children learn and thrive if they don't feel safe going to school or being in school. 2 out of 3 young people worry about being harmed in and around school. Sadly, half of all children experience this violence. Children can't learn when they fear for their safety. They shouldn't have to drop out of school to keep themselves safe, but far too many do. GPE values its participation in the Safe to Learn initiative because we cannot transform education systems to help children reach their potential without ending violence in and through schools. Ladies and gentlemen, violence is not inevitable. We have proven solutions to keep children safe. Girls and boys often experience different forms of violence from peers and even teachers. Ensuring gender equality is critical to ending violence in and through schools. And that is one reason why GPE hardwires gender equality throughout our operations. GPE supports partner countries to reduce violence, from training school management committees on child protection issues in Nigeria, for example, to establishing telephone hotlines to report abuse in Pakistan. GPE's approach to education helps tackle violence at its root, but to make exponential progress, we need political leaders to step up, to prioritize and end violence in schools and to place it at the center of education plans, programs, and policies. It is why the Secretary General's Transforming Education Summit later this year is so important. It will give leaders an opportunity to make political commitments to tackle school violence once and for all. We can and will do better. Thank you.
My name is Ashton Kutcher. I'm the co-founder of a nonprofit called Thorn. We build and deploy cutting-edge software in the fight against the sexual exploitation of children. I'm also the father of 2 kids, and they're the reason I do this. They're my why. When I put a phone in their hands, I have to make sure that it's safe for them to be online. And the truth is, it's not. I'm sure you all know child pornography, or what it actually is, child sexual abuse material, was nearly eliminated back in the 1990s. At the time, the crime was conducted primarily through the mail, and new laws and increased prosecutions made it simply too risky for that trade to exist, so it dried up. And then the internet came. And along with the beauty and the power of the internet to connect us all, to build business and so much more, came a massive resurgence of the horrors of child sexual abuse. Since the start of the pandemic, child sexual abuse is on the rise. We see that reflected in the numbers from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. In 2021, close to 85 million files containing child sexual abuse were filed. In the previous year, that number was 65 million. It's growing. And our own research has shown that last year, 2 out of every 5 minors received a cold solicitation for explicit imagery. 60% of this abuse happens to children that are younger than 12, many of them pre-verbal. That represents the now. We're still working to address the current state of the problem. But what about the future? And it's not even the future. It's already here. New technologies are constantly emerging, and most of the time, developers don't consider how perpetrators are going to use them to abuse children. Take, for example, apps and platforms that have live streaming capabilities. I know many of you in this room have been trying to address this phenomenon for years, and that has been by appealing to the companies that host these capabilities. But what happens when live streaming apps are built on the blockchain and there's no one to go to? Decentralization is a powerful tool, but we're going to have to think about what that means in protecting children. Another threat on the horizon is the metaverse. It's created with a lot of vision and enthusiasm. The metaverse is, at its core, a law-free world that multiplies the ways that perpetrators can groom and exploit children. Recently, the team that I work with went into the metaverse and experienced this real time. It's there. This is what we, the collective, here in this room, have to think about when we think about the future of the internet. What do we want to build? And this is also what we think about at Thorn. We're a nonprofit organization, and we build technology to fight the sexual abuse of children online. Every platform with an upload button can and likely does host child sexual abuse material. Our software also helps companies detect, report, and delete child sexual abuse material that lives on their platforms. To date, we've yet to see a company that has implemented our tool and didn't find child sexual abuse material. And that's because, unfortunately, this problem is platform agnostic. We also develop cutting-edge tools that help law enforcement identify the most at-risk cases and help them rescue the kids that are in immediate danger. We can't fight this alone. We need policymakers who understand the issue and have urgency. We need tech industry to prioritize this issue and put their best and brightest on it. And we need all sorts of efforts in victim support and preventative work. To ensure that we cooperate in a close-knit network, the End Violence Partnership is crucial. So we thank you for the great work that you do that enables us to do what we do. You all have really pushed us to think about what's next. Our work with the End Violence is some of the most complex and groundbreaking work that we do, because you're pushing the envelope to think smarter and more connected. These devices in our kids' hands, they're going to be there whether we like it or not. And I'm confident that all of us can come together and focus on how to achieve our goal. And we will be able to make the internet a safe place for kids.
I am very glad to reaffirm UNICEF's commitment to end violence against children. This work could not be more important or more timely. Every child has the right to be safe, nurtured, and cared for at all times, in all situations. Everyone with you today and so many others have fought to help children realize that right. The End Violence movement has demanded public attention and driven public action towards achievement of SDG 16.2, ending all forms of violence against children. But we have seen that progress threatened by the COVID-19 pandemic. Lockdowns have put children in unavoidable proximity with abusers. Loss of income and the emotional strain of economic hardship have increased rates of domestic violence, especially against women and girls. School closures have deprived children of safe spaces and the support of teachers. Budget cuts have also disrupted and weakened child protection services. We need to get back on track, and we know what we have to do. We need to keep up the pressure to integrate child protection measures in all COVID-19 prevention and response plans. We also need to keep pushing for investments in parenting. As few as 5 home visits from a trained nurse or community worker to teach parents about the importance of attachment, play, and positive discipline is proven to reduce harm and improve safety. Parenting support should be universally available. As schools reopen, teachers, social workers, and staff need training to recognize signs of violence and abuse. And all school systems should be able to provide psychosocial support to help children overcome trauma. Especially in humanitarian emergencies and other crisis situations, we need to increase social protection that can ease financial burdens that heighten the risk of harm for children. And we need to keep making our voices heard and making space for children and young people at the table. Their lived experiences and their courage are helping dispel shame, deepen understanding, and drive solutions. Violence against children happens in every community, in every country, and it will take every one of us to end it for every child.
Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, every day, millions of children around the world suffer violence at the hands of parents and caregivers, siblings, peers, and other authority figures. Such violence can have severe short and long-term consequences for health, including injuries, sexually transmitted infections, depression, anxiety, substance use, and death from suicide or homicide. It can also affect a child's education and employment prospects and lead to victims of violence becoming perpetrators later in life. The evidence is clear. Violence against children is preventable. We know the policies and the programs that work. WHO is supporting countries to implement a package of policies we call INSPIRE, 7 strategies for ending violence against children. And we're supporting health workers to identify and respond to survivors of violence. As leaders, we're entrusted with the care of the next generation. We call on political and policy leaders everywhere to address this issue in word and deed. As Nelson Mandela said, we owe our children, the most vulnerable citizens in any society, a life free from violence and fear. It's up to us to create a healthier, safer, fairer future for all children everywhere. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, violence against children is pervasive and widespread. It affects children of all ages and in various settings, from homes to schools to online spaces. We know that adolescent girls and young women can experience multiple and intersecting forms of violence. Almost 1 in every 4 ever married or partnered 15 to 19-year-old girls have already experienced physical and/or sexual violence from an intimate partner. 4 million girls annually are at risk of undergoing female genital mutilation, and 650 million women and girls alive today were married as children. Adolescent girls are also vulnerable to online violence and harassment, human trafficking, and to sexual and labor exploitation, including in crisis, conflict, and humanitarian contexts. These abuses can have lifelong consequences for adolescent girls and young women, restricting their access to education and employment, increasing health risks due to early or unintended pregnancy, and preventing them from participating equally in political and public life. Research has shown that intimate partner violence and violence against children often occur together, and that there are shared risk factors and gendered social norms which relate both to violence against children and to violence against women. There are also associations between childhood exposure to violence and perpetrating or experiencing violence later in life. That is why addressing the intersection between violence against women and violence against children needs to be at the heart of a comprehensive approach to both prevention and response. This will require strong partnership and deeper collaboration between our efforts. Through initiatives such as the Generation Equality Action Coalitions, UN Women is partnering with multi-stakeholders to accelerate transformative actions to address violence against women and girls. These actions, which center adolescent girls' participation, agency, and leadership, remain indispensable to ensuring that all children and adolescents can live lives free from violence. As a founding board member of the End Violence Partnership, UN Women remains committed to comprehensive action to end gender-based violence against women and girls in all their diversity. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, it is an honor to address this leaders' event of the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children. Violence against children is a widespread phenomenon that too often goes undetected, unrecorded, and unpunished. Globally, 1 in 2 children suffers some form of violence each year, with devastating consequences for the child and ultimately for societies as a whole. Children are often the most vulnerable among us. As we work to overcome a global pandemic, while conflict rages around the world, they are at even greater risk. Strained resources and capacities, coupled with economic hardship and inequalities, leave children more exposed to exploitation, both online and offline, as well as recruitment by criminal and armed groups, including terrorist groups. The UN Office on Drugs and Crime stands with all our partners to better protect children through comprehensive responses that foster cooperation across different institutions, addressing root causes and promoting sustainable responses. Through our global program to end violence against children, we have provided technical assistance to over 50 countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia to support institutions and actors from the justice, child protection, security, health and education sectors in preventing and confronting serious forms of violence against children. We will continue to work with all stakeholders to respond to violence against children and to empower children and young people as agents of change. I am encouraged that this global partnership brings together a diverse coalition of government, business, civil society, and community leaders, joining forces for a world where children are no longer subjected to violence. Working together, we can realize Sustainable Development Goal 16 and all of the SDGs to leave children and young people with a more prosperous world, free from violence. Thank you.
Greetings. I'm Jeffrey Sachs. I'm president of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network and university professor at Columbia University. And I'm very greatly honored to be invited to make a few brief remarks for the End Violence Leaders Summit. In particular, I've been asked to comment on the question of mobilizing financing for the rights of children. So I've been asked, what does the global financing architecture look like right now? Well, for development, it is bad. It is bleak. The shortfall in overall SDG financing is around $1 trillion per year. Now, that's a big number, but it's less than 1% of the gross world product. The SDG gap can be closed mainly by expanding the role of global financing, for example, through the multilateral development banks and through specialized funds like UNICEF or like the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria, Gavi, and many others. I'm currently co-chairing with Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed an ad hoc high-level working group to identify the gaps in SDG financing and in the ways that those gaps can be filled. And I'm very eager to hear the specific recommendations of the End Violence Coalition and how this high-level working group, this ad hoc group, can be helpful. Why are global investments, official development assistance, domestic resources, multilateral resources to achieve SDG 16.2 so low? The main point is that our investments in all aspects of sustainable development are grossly underfunded. The world is rich, but development finance is scarce. We didn't even fill the $100 billion a year for climate safety. We are underfunding profoundly education, access to healthcare, education, and every other area of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I'm asked, what is my vision for a world where adequate investments are made to promote and uphold children's rights? The basic point is that the world as a whole working together needs to shift at least $1 trillion per year of the gross world product towards investments in the Sustainable Development Goals in the developing countries. Now, this sounds, again, like a large number, but it's less than 1% of gross world output and less than 4% of world saving, which is put at around $27 trillion a year, most of which goes to the rich countries. The role of the public development banks, that is, banks in both the high-income and the low-income countries for financing development, banks like the French Development Agency, KfW, or the multilateral development banks like the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, and others are critical for moving this incremental $1 trillion to the urgent needs of children and all the rest of the Sustainable Development Goals, the safe climate, protection of biodiversity, protection of our ecosystems, and the rest. And we need the specialized funds like UNICEF or the Green Climate Fund or the Global Environment Facility to be properly financed. The world is rich, but development finance is woefully inadequate. What is needed to unlock significant funding? Now, this is for the End Violence Coalition. First, a plan. And to end violence against children means to address children's needs throughout the entire life cycle. Plus, in addition to the plan, a financing strategy for each part of the plan. There won't be one overall fund, but there should be funding identified through multilateral development banks and specialized funds for safe pregnancy and childbirth, for social support, for families such as the Social Protection Fund that the ILO is promoting, for universal early childhood development in pre-K and schooling up through upper secondary, as is guaranteed in SDG 4, but not yet financed. In other words, we need a financing strategy for each part of the plan. Who needs to do what? I suggest that the End Violence Coalition promote the full coalition for the rights of children to make an integrated plan to estimate even roughly the needed global financing for each stage, to create a steering group among the main organizations to combine the various elements of the rights of children into an integrated SDG program with an identified financing strategy for each component. And then I hope that the United Nations, including certainly the ad hoc high-level working group that I am co-chairing, can help to promote this needed financial scale-up with the G20, with the Bretton Woods institutions, with ECOSOC, and with other important groups. My feeling is that we can make the breakthrough, because on the one hand, the needs are very significant and across the board, at least $1 trillion a year. On the other hand, as a macroeconomist, I know how rich our world is, how we have gross world product of $110 trillion a year, 27 trillion of saving. Almost all of it, or not almost all of it, but so much of it disproportionately going to the rich countries. It's time for fairness, justice, and our common interest in a stable world, which unfortunately is becoming ever more unstable. We need to address development finance holistically. And within that, the rights of the children will certainly stand out as an absolutely core pillar to invest in the future that we want. Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you today.
That was an inspiring start to the Leaders event. Minister Hallengren unequivocally reaffirmed the government of Sweden's commitment to end violence against children. David Miliband powerfully outlined the need for action on 4 fronts to protect children from violence in humanitarian and conflict settings. Natasya from Indonesia reminded us powerfully that most violence against children takes place in the home, and former President Kikwete placed a spotlight on the criticality of every child being safe to learn. Ashton Kutcher spoke about his role as a parent and the need for policymakers, the tech industry and others to work together to make the internet safe for children. UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell made a compelling case to scale up support for parents and caregivers. And UN Women Executive Director Sima Bahous spoke to the importance of the gender dimension of violence, the reality that girls are disproportionately impacted. But above all, we heard urgent calls for far greater investment proportional to the scale and the impact of the violence that children face. So while it is clear that there is an urgent need to do more, the good news is that cost-effective, evidence-based solutions to end violence against children exist, with rigorous studies that show us what works at scale to keep children safe. And change is happening. Change is happening in many places around the world right now. Our next group of speakers will showcase the solutions, the actions that they are taking with partners to keep children safe. The most senior government representatives from end violence pathfinding countries will outline comprehensive national action. Child activists will speak truth to power. And we will hear how parliamentarians are coming together to drive change. Before we hear directly from these leaders, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the leadership we saw in 21 pathfinding countries. Countries which held government-led national policy dialogues as part of the Together to End Violence campaign. These important dialogues were designed to achieve consensus among national stakeholders on key areas of progress and identify the main gaps and the priorities for scaling up evidence-based strategies to end violence against children. And they were all informed by the global status report led by the World Health Organization. This work will continue. National stakeholders will keep coming together to strengthen implementation, to enhance the cross-ministry, cross-sector collaboration, and ensure that national action plans to end violence against children are adequately funded and implemented. It's now my great privilege to introduce Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, to discuss the EU's approach to ending violence against children, not only within the European Union, but also internationally.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, since the war in Ukraine started, 2 million children have sought shelter in the European Union. And I recently met 2 of them, 2 very brave teenage girls on the train to Paris, on the 4th day of their journey from Odessa. I was so moved by their story, like so many others. Russia's cruel war of conquest made them leave everything behind. Their home, their friends, their fathers and mothers. But not their dreams. We are doing everything in our power in Europe to protect and care for these children, to give them a normal childhood and youth, and keep their dreams alive, along with those of all other children in the world. But we also know that those dreams have been shattered for so many victims of violence and abuse, or trafficking and sexual exploitation. This suffering is hidden away under the surface here in Europe and around the world. And unfortunately, this pain and heartache is often the result of sexual abuse. Children who are hurt and made to feel shame, blame, fear, and guilt. And this is not a thing of the past. It is an everyday reality. And the pandemic even threatened to throw us back years or decades in our fight against child sexual abuse. The numbers are telling. According to Internet Watch, there was a 64% spike last year in confirmed cases. And many more cases are never reported. This is a pandemic of neglect that must stop. And this is why the European Commission is taking action. We have just proposed new European legislation to prevent and combat child sexual abuse online. The legislation has 3 pillars: new mandatory rules, robust safeguards, and a strong enforcement capacity. First, we propose to make it an obligation for digital platforms to act fast, to detect, report, and remove illegal material. And those who do not do so would face serious penalties. Second, we will protect fundamental rights with safeguards, because we cannot give platforms a backdoor to violate people's privacy. The tools used, for example, to crack down on online grooming, must be targeted and lawful. And third, a new EU Centre on Child Sexual Abuse will help step up enforcement. The independent centre will work closely with national law enforcement, Europol and support groups. Its mission, like yours, is to rescue and empower survivors and bring the perpetrators to justice. This new European legislation is one piece of our global commitment to protect human rights and the rights of the child. We are building a safer internet, and we are acting together to end violence against children in all its cruel forms. I want to thank the End Violent Partnership for its admirable work, because every child we protect and empower gives rise to hope. The 2 Ukrainian girls with whom I spoke told me that they dream to return home. They want to rebuild their beautiful country and break the cycle of violence. Their hope has not been killed, and it is shining bright for all of us. Thank you very much for your attention.
The Executive Director, UNICEF, regional and country representatives, distinguished participants. On behalf of the Republic of Zambia, we are pleased to make a statement on the efforts our government is taking to promote and uphold the well-being of children. Zambia has become one of the world's pathfinding countries because we believe in the rights of children. Being a pathfinding country means we're committed to providing a child-friendly environment that allows children to survive. And not only to survive, but to thrive and realize their full potential. We believe in ensuring that children are protected from negative influences that have a potential to hinder their growth, and we believe in taking strong action to prevent violence against children. Zambia has developed the National Prevention and Response Plan to end violence against children by 2025. This plan is based on the fact that violence against children is preventable if the underlying causes are identified and addressed early on. Our vision is to foster a society where children can grow and live free from all forms of violence. For those who have experienced violence, government and our partners must ensure that affected children have access to care and indeed support services. This plan is being implemented by the National Coordination Committee for the Children, NCCC, and the District Community Child Protection Committees. Alongside proactive policies such as universal free education and social cash transfers for the poorer families, we are rebuilding our economy to provide a brighter future for all our children. This government hosted our maiden national dialogue on ending violence against children in November 2021, just months after we assumed public office. The main outcome of this dialogue was government affirming our commitment to ending all forms of violence against children. We have committed to putting in place appropriate administrative and legislative measures to enforce child protection laws. Further, we have committed to strengthen reporting and response mechanisms to end violence against children. This government has expedited the process of enacting the Children's Court Bill. This bill will bring together, for the first time in our statute, existing international and national legislation such as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, the Convention on the Protection of Children and Cooperation in Respect of Inter-Country Adoption, and the Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction. Distinguished participants, action to end violence against children is not only for government agencies, but also requires collaborative efforts from stakeholders and cooperating partners. The government of the Republic of Zambia is committed to 1. Enhancing the development and implementation of child-friendly policies, legislation, and regulations which aim to safeguard the development and welfare of our children, all our children. 2. Ensuring that interventions aimed at addressing violence against children are undertaken in an efficient and effective manner. 3. Providing better, more timely assistance and care, including health and mental health support to address the long-term consequences of violence against children. 4. Enhancing effective collaboration with the key partners in preventing and responding to violence against children. 5. Creating an enabling environment to ensure that families experiencing domestic violence, and in particular violence against children, are able to access appropriate support services all the time. 6. Promoting teaching of children's rights in institutions of learning to increase awareness among children on their rights. 7. Sensitizing the general public on the rights of children at all levels and all times. And 8. Promoting research on violence against children by encouraging the safe and ethical collection of data and evidence relating to acts of violence against children to inform national and international responses as necessary. Distinguished participants, we wish to conclude by reaffirming Zambia's commitment to implementing and enforcing the international and regional conventions that aim to promote and protect the rights of our children and to ensuring that our national policies and legislation take into account the provisions of these conventions. The government of the Republic of Zambia will protect our children, provide free universal quality education, and grow our economy for generations to come. I thank you for your kind attention.
In my 25 years of working in the education sector, I've been throughout horrified by how we treat children, and especially the poorest of the poor in marginalized rural areas, where it's very difficult to bring them into school. But when in school, they're beaten up. And it's not just the school, it's the religious seminaries, it's the workplace, it's the other caregiving institutions, orphanages, juvenile systems that really beat the pulp out of the children. And it's a very common saying in Pakistan that parents in rural areas, when they put their children in school, they say to the teacher, the skin is yours, the bone is ours. So, and what I've seen is livestock and is more important to parents than children. So, so when I entered politics as an elected parliamentarian 4 years ago, my first priority was to put in a bill on prohibition against corporal punishment. And it's not just schools, but all the seminaries, caregiving institutions, jails, working places. So it's a wide institutional reality that we are covering in that bill. It took me 3 years. It took me 3 years in the parliament of having a bipartisan lobby, working with media, working with the judiciary, and working with my international stakeholders, and especially International Parliamentary Education Network, and reaching out to other parliamentarians all across the board. It was very, very important. And last November, we passed it for the Islamabad Capital Territory, and I'm working on putting the rules of business together, which is very important. Passing a bill is important, but getting it implemented is most important. So, and congratulations to the 63 countries globally who have passed this bill, but there are many countries who still have not. And we have to join hands. We have to work together. It's not easy. It's not easy. In this patriarchal parliamentary systems, children are not a priority, and there is a big pushback to children. And parliamentarians have to come together to get these legislations passed and be convinced that we have to make this world a better place for children. And especially today when there is such a lot of conflict in this world. So I look forward to joining hands with all of the parliamentarians globally to making it work and ending violence against children all across the globe. Thank you.
Excellencies, heads and leaders of pathfinding countries to end violence against children. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to highly appreciate the organization of this Together to End Violence Leaders event. As a pathfinding country of the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children, the Royal Government of Cambodia always pays high attention to the prevention of violence against children and the promotion of child protection. In fact, Cambodia has steadily prepared and implemented policies and action plans, such as the Action Plan to Prevent and Respond to Violence Against Children 2017-2021, the National Social Protection Policy Framework 2016-2025, and the National Policy on Child Protection System 2019-2029 to achieve an end to violence against children. In addition, in 2019, Cambodia became a pathfinding country of the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children by prioritizing the strengthening of the implementation of policy on alternative care for children to promote family-based care instead of residential care. In 2021, based on an evaluation of the action plan to prevent and respond to violence against children 2017-2021, Cambodia is on the right track in preventing violence against children. Going forward, Cambodia will continue to be more active in our efforts to ensure the safety of children everywhere, such as at home, school, and community. More importantly, the royal government is strongly committed to ensuring that all children can live in a conducive environment for their nurtures with necessary protection provided to end violence against children in all forms, as well as to achieve Cambodia's pledge in the regional and global frameworks through the implementation of national action plans and policies that have been set out. In addition to the efforts in each country, achieving an end to violence against children also requires global cooperation, especially in the context of the continued spread of COVID-19 that has hampered the progress of the Sustainable Development Goals pertaining to ending violence against children. As such, I would like to take this opportunity to share some key ideas aimed at ending global violence against children as follows. First, promoting the spirit of unity as well as strengthening and expanding existing bilateral and multilateral cooperation to promote child welfare and child protection, especially improving coordination mechanisms among all stakeholders to share important data and information, to take timely and stringent measures against all forms of violence against children. Second, fostering global commitment by mobilizing both financial and non-financial resources to support and ensure the sustainability of the movement to end violence against children within the framework of the United Nations and international organizations, as well as other regional organizations. And third, accelerating progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, especially Target 16.2, ending all forms of violence against children by 2030. Thank you.
5 years ago, World Vision made a bold decision to put the weight of our whole partnership with nearly 40,000 staff spanning 100 countries into our global campaign. It takes a world to end violence against children. The choice of this campaign came directly from the children we serve. They told us repeatedly that violence is the issue they are most concerned about. It affects almost every second child in the world and rarely makes it to the top of the agenda for any government. Mobilizing an entire organization of World Vision size was not easy. It meant bringing together our programming from many sectors, from advocacy and communications, so that we could truly bring change and influence policy. And the bottom line is, we did it. What was once thought impossible, aligning and acting around a shared vision from local to global levels, became who we are as an organization. An organization that amplifies the voice of children and stands with them against all forms of violence. We promised that our campaign will run from the smallest village right through to the international stage, and we kept that promise. Since the launch of the campaign, more than 7 million people, including countless children, joined us in our quest to end violence in childhood. They helped us to influence 987 policy changes at local and national level, and to impact the lives of 431 million children across 87 countries. We were not acting alone, but in partnership with many international agencies, with faith leaders, with civil society organizations, local governments, and academia across the globe. It truly took a world to lift the voices of children and get ending violence firmly on the agenda. Our experience in delivering this campaign, both internally and externally, taught us 3 things. First, political commitment from the highest level of leadership is needed to move things forward. But it will only go so far if it's not underpinned by effective solutions and investment. Second, we need strong partnerships. A complex issue like ending violence against children can't be solved by one actor or even one sector alone. Third, and most importantly, children themselves are the best advocates for change, and their action can move mountains. We saw children transform their communities and even convince policymakers to increase budgets to address violence. The last 2 years have been unprecedented and have put so many children at risk of violence, whether through COVID lockdowns, conflict, or climate change. We face historic challenges. So we need a collective vision for a brighter future, for all the children to be free from violence and allowed to reach their God-given potential. That requires deep transformation of our societies. We call all our partners, policymakers, and faith leaders to recognize the importance of protection from violence in children across every community and step up their investment to end it now. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السادة المشاركين في مؤتمر معا لإنهاء العنف، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن وزارة التنمية الاجتماعية تعمل على استجابة لحالات العنف ضد الطفل والمرأة، كونهم الجزء الرئيسي من منظومة الحماية في المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية، وما يتوافق مع الاتفاقيات الدولية التي صادق عليها الأردن، وكذلك وفقا للتشريعات والأنظمة الوطنية النافذة. ولغاية الاستجابة لحالات العنف ضد الطفل والمرأة، وبالشراكة مع إدارة حماية الأسرة والأحداث في مديرية الأمن العام، فقد عملت الوزارة على استحداث مكاتب الخدمة الاجتماعية، وعددها 19 مكتب موزعين في كافة أنحاء المملكة، تقدم هذه المكاتب كافة الخدمات الاجتماعية، النفسية، الصحية، القانونية والإدارية، من خلال فريق خاص من أخصائيين النفسيين والاجتماعيين يعملون على استقبال حالات العنف وتقييمها وتحديد الاحتياجات وتقييم عوامل الخطورة، ووضعت خطة المناسبة لهذه الحالات وتنفيذها وإعادة تقييمها ومتابعتها. كما أنه يتم بيان مدى حاجة هذه الحالات إلى تقديم الخدمات الإيوائية لها في دور التابعة لوزارة التنمية الاجتماعية سواء للنساء والفتيات أو الأطفال. وفيما يتعلق بتقديم الخدمات الإيوائية للنساء والفتيات المحتاجين للرعاية والحماية الإيوائية، فقد أنشأت الوزارة التنمية الاجتماعية 5 دور منتشرة في جميع أنحاء المملكة. أما بالنسبة للتعامل مع حالات الأطفال فاقدي السند الأسري والمحتاجين للحماية والرعاية الإيوائية، فإنه يتم تحويلهم من خلال مكاتب الحماية للدور المناسبة للفئة العمرية لهم ذكورا وإناثا، وهي 4 دور بالمملكة تم إنشائها لهذه الغاية. وتعمل كافة الدور الإيوائية للنساء والفتيات والأطفال على تقديم كافة الخدمات القانونية والاجتماعية والنفسية والتعليمية والتأهيل المهني والتمكين الاقتصادي وبرامج التعليم الأكاديمي والأنشطة. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Bonjour, this is Patrice Evra. You may know me as an ex-footballer player, captain. Manchester United, Juventus, the French national team, Monaco, Marseille, etc., etc. Or at Mr. I Love This Game, where I spread that positive energy and the philosophy of life on my social media. What you may not know is at the age of 13, I've been sexually abused by my aide teacher. I've been only recently able to open to the world about this trauma when I released my autobiography last year. As is often the case, the perpetrator was someone who gained both mine and my family trust. Perfect plan. Was living inside the school, so no more traveling, no more wake up at 5 in the morning. When it came to bedtime, that's when the nightmare began. The person who trusted became my abuser. Every night, the night will start really nicely. He will cook food, let me play video game. Soon, I was in my bed. That's when he will come in my room and trying everything to put my pants down. And I fought back. I even remember tied my shoes laces on my pant, my short, to make sure he didn't succeed. Unfortunately, he did. Then I back home, I told my mother, I don't want to stay anymore in that place. She asked me why, and I never answered to it. Thanks to the woman of my life, Margot, who I trust, I was finally able to talk about my sexual abuse because I feel safe. Due to my African upbringing, even talking about love is a taboo subject. So what's happening to myself was even harder to talk about. And then I play football in a high level, and we all know in sports, the toxic masculinity is something so common. Children have the right to feel protected and respected, but billions of children do not. Instead, they live day and night with fear. There is a silence and stigma and shame who only help who those perpetrate the violence. Abuse against children have been accepted for so many years. But let's be clear, this is not acceptable. We need to educate society to protect girls and boys, to support them with service are funded and focus on the needs of the survivor. The shame that survivors feel, it's so heavy to carry. And on my recent trip to West Africa, I was able to meet some survivors who were struggling with their unfair burden. During my visit, I was really moved listening to those children survive about unbelievable abuse. But also, I was really hopeful when I participated to that class teaching young boys about consent, a really important word. And those little girls speak up against dangerous cultural norm and practice. As a survivor and public figure, I realize how important it is to have those difficult and uncomfortable conversations that force us to dig deeper within ourselves. And I really seek and encourage other people to do the same, even if I know it's not easy. After football, I really want to be involved in amplifying all the good work has been done in the issue of violence against children in order to instigate a concrete change around the world. I would like to raise awareness and urge the government to protect those fundamental rights for children by supporting parents, schools, health sector. As an extremely positive person, it's important for me to shine a light not only on the problem, but also on the solution. I would like to lead by example. Together, we can change 1 billion futures.
Hello, I'm Jamila Biggio, and I'm the Senior Coordinator for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment with the U.S. Agency for International Development. The threat of violence against children is a heartbreaking reality and has grown even more urgent as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. government does not take this threat lightly. Our strategy to advance protection and care for children in adversity prioritizes protecting children from violence, exploitation, abuse, and neglect, and it guides our investments to prevent and respond to this violence. This includes attention to gender-based violence affecting children. Ending all forms of gender-based violence has been a policy priority for President Biden for years. From our government's first ever national strategy on gender equity and equality, to an updated strategy to prevent and respond to gender-based violence globally, and our first ever national action plan to address this issue domestically, the United States has laid out an ambitious plan for how we will address gender-based violence in all its forms across all ages and stages of the lifespan. All children have a right to protection from violence and to safe, nurturing, and protective family care. The U.S. government is proud to have pioneered new data tools like the Violence Against Children surveys, also known as the VACS. The VACS research provides us better understanding of how, where, and why violence against children takes place, so that we can develop more effective plans to prevent it. USAID is supporting governments to do just that. After the VACS is completed, we're providing technical assistance to help many governments and civil society develop national violence against children protection plans, and we're then supporting governments to implement these comprehensive plans with a multi-sectoral approach. Understanding that most violence occurs in the home, we work alongside partner governments to build and scale programs that nurture families, that educate parents, shifting the paradigm away from corporal and harsh punishments of children to responsive, nurturing care and early learning. We strengthen child protection systems so that they're better equipped to take evidence-based steps to protect vulnerable children. We increase the capacity of social workers and service providers and support the development of electronic case management systems to help keep better track of those at risk. We educate parents, caregivers, youth, and children on how they can prevent and respond to violence in their homes, schools, and communities. And we are also shining a spotlight on the growing crisis of online violence and exploitation of children and youth. In all of our work, we are elevating the voices of youth and children so that programming and policies to prevent and respond to violence they experience is directly informed by their needs and priorities. We have new tools coming out now to help prevent and mitigate and respond to child, early, and forced marriage and unions, and to female genital mutilation and cutting, 2 forms of gender-based violence that detrimentally impact children. We remain committed to working with the Partnership to End Violence to ensure the world's children can focus on being children, to play, learn, interact with others safely, and live each day without fear of harm. I look forward to working with all of you to make this a reality. Thank you.
Hello, my name is A.B. Albrechtsen and I'm the CEO of the Lego Foundation. Some of you might know about our work. Here, children are at the heart of everything we do. We have an unshakable focus on helping more children reach their full potential in the world. That means a commitment to provide children with the best start in life to realize their right to grow, learn, and thrive. I'm delighted to be here today at this important event in our joint effort to promote our shared vision, a world in which every child grows up in a safe, secure, and nurturing environment. I want to talk about the importance of play and the connection between parents, caregivers, and children to prevent violence against children and mitigate its many negative consequences. Now, play and violence may seem like two very different and opposing factors, but the two are highly connected. Children from birth to age 3 spend more time in their home, typically with their parents or primary caregiver, than at any other age. Sadly, this is also the setting where children tend to experience violence most often. Helping parents and caregivers to develop core skills that will allow them to strengthen relationships by engaging in playful learning activities with children can have a dramatic impact. Through consistent, positive interaction, play can help create a safe home environment where children can live and learn without fear, establish a long-lasting bond, and lay the foundation for a positive and healthy relationship that can grow throughout childhood. Play can also promote resilience in children who have experienced violence, for example in humanitarian settings, and reduce risk factors to protect children's future. The potential for children to learn fundamental skills in the early years is vast, and a focus on parent-child play can be life-changing. The experiences and relationships in this period, along with other components of a nurturing care like health and nutrition, have a huge impact on neural development. A wealth of evidence shows that sensitive parenting in the first year of life plays a pivotal role in establishing a secure attachment between parent and child. A positive attachment has been connected to later life outcomes such as emotional regulation, cognitive development, and the creation of coping strategies to deal with setbacks and adversity. Now, research shows us that the benefits of play flow both to parents as well as children. Parents report that playing with their children makes them feel good. It's a fundamental to their own happiness. It makes them less stressed, more energized, and more creative. Many programs which aim to support parents experiencing mental health difficulties advocate play as a context in which parents can form a positive relationship with their child and build a mutual bond. We all have a role to play in ending violence against children. The LEGO Foundation aims to build a safe future for children who are empowered to become lifelong learners. Governments and funders must increase investments in early childhood programs to create nurturing environments that support playful parent interaction. Only together can we build the safe homes that we all dream of for children, prevent abuse, and nurture parent-child relationships for life. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.
I would like to welcome you all to today's panel's discussion and to introduce our incredible panelists, members of the End Violence Children and Youth Advisory Team, and who have been doing impressive work in their countries to eradicate violence against children. Medina is a member of the Borno State Children's Parliament in Nigeria, and Aruna, who is the president of the Parliamentary Group for the Protection of Children's Rights in Mali. I'm gonna go directly to the questions and today's session, Children Speaking Truth to Power, will focus on normalization of violence and how this hinder development. And I'll go direct to Medina. Medina, understand your particular concern about violence being normalized. What do you mean by normalizing violence?
What I mean by violence being normalized, in my country, children take violence, or they feel that going through violence is a normal thing. Let me give examples. There are girls who get married at an early age and they feel it's normal because they are parented to get them married And when they get to their matrimonial home, they tend to face domestic violence. They tend to go into different kind of hazard, and also she doesn't have the ability to be social, like mix with her friends and do a lot of things, and that's also a violent for her, because she's a child, and a child is not meant to be a caregiver. She's meant to be taken care of.
Thank you. Of course, we have to change norm, values, and conducts in our society. So, ça va, Runa? C'est ton tour. We like to hear you.
Parce que l'enfant a vraiment le droit d'être entendu. Tout ce qui est fait pour les enfants, sans les enfants et contre les enfants. Nous menons des activités de sensibilisation, de plaidoyer et d'information dans notre pays. Le Mali est un pays vraiment touché par la guerre. Surtout au centre et au nord, nous voyons des graves violations des droits des enfants. L'excision, le mariage d'enfants, la déscolarisation des jeunes filles aussi est un facteur qui existe. Ma première déclaration maintenant, les autorités gouvernementales des pays du monde entier doivent mettre en place des processus de paix dans les pays qui sont en conflit. Dans mon pays, au centre et au nord du Mali, la violence a détruit des familles, des écoles et des hôpitaux sont attaqués. Nous avons eu des tas de déplacés qui quittent le centre et le nord pour venir s'installer ici dans la capitale. Les enfants sont mutilés, d'autres sont enrôlés de force dans les groupes armés et des jeunes filles sont violées ou sont agressées sexuellement.
Medina, precisely talking about actions, what would you like to see from the world leaders?
The actions that I want world leaders to take or to do is to see that world leaders help various countries to create child-led platforms whereby they can be able to speak directly to the affected children. And secondly, world leaders should create platforms for children, parents, traditional leaders, or even people in the society, government agencies, to kind of tell them or create awareness on the effects of normalizing violence within the society on children. And how to break the cycle, there is a word that says catch them young approach. So world leaders should create opportunities for children to use their voice as a tool to tell the leaders or even tell the people in the community that violence is not good on children. And my challenge question to the world leaders is what kind of action are they taking to see that they collaborate with government agencies and NGOs to step out to see that policies, interventions, or even programs are done to see that violence is no longer normalized within the society.
As we come towards the end of this inspiring session, I would like to invite Aruna to share some closing remarks.
Au nom des enfants du monde entier, nous exigeons que les autorités en charge de la protection et la promotion des droits des enfants mettent en place surtout encore plus de textes et de conventions internationales en plus de la CDE et de la 4B visant à protéger et à promouvoir les droits des enfants. Nous voulons qu'ils créent des tribunes de libre expression à l'échelle internationale où les enfants eux-mêmes peuvent parler des problèmes auxquels ils font face, c'est-à-dire instaurer un contact direct entre les enfants leaders de différents pays pour qu'ils échangent et se proposent des solutions. Nous voulons aussi qu'ils dédient des fonds suffisants et adéquats à la mise en application des plans, des lois et conventions visant à la protection des droits des enfants. Ensemble, mettons fin à la violence contre les enfants. Merci.
Thank you once again. Gracias. Merci beaucoup. Thanks again for these world leaders who are speaking to all of you and have a great responsibility because they're bringing the voices of all the children in the world.
My name is Shin Mi-jun. I'm Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary for Human Rights Affairs of Japan. It's my honor to have this opportunity to deliver a statement on behalf of the Japanese government. I'd like to thank the co-chairs and the End Violence Secretariat for organizing this event. Violence against children can have significant impact on children's physical and psychological development. Its prevention is a critical challenge that all of society need to tackle. Japan has been making every effort to achieve target 16.2 of the SDGs, namely to end abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and all forms of violence against and torture of children. To this end, as a pathfinding country, Japan has formulated its National Action Plan to end violence against children. The launching event was just organized last week, together with Finland and Colombia. The English version of Japan's National Action Plan is available on the website of the End Violence Partnership and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. So we can share our practices and effort with other countries and stakeholders. Japan remains committed to the Fund to End Violence Against Children. In March 2021, we made a contribution of $1.4 million to the fund to reduce the impact of COVID-19 on children and parents placed under already fragile situations. Through the assistance, for example, it is expected that 400,000 parents and children in Uganda and Kenya will receive support for parenting and child safety. In closing, we would like to reiterate that the international community must step up its efforts in fighting violence against children in every circumstances, including but not limited to COVID-19 pandemic. I sincerely hope that today's event will serve as renewed momentum for the international community's commitment to build a better world where every child can grow up in a violence-free environment and have hopes and dreams for the future. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Julian Grant, and I'm Australia's e-Safety Commissioner. I really welcome the opportunity to be able to work with you to share a common mission, which is to stop violence against children. E-Safety is the world's first online safety regulator. We were established 7 years ago, and we take a very unique approach that we want to share with the world. That is around prevention, protection, and proactive change. We have a range of regulatory schemes, including taking down child sexual exploitation material, pro-terrorist content, youth-based cyberbullying, and image-based abuse. And you won't be surprised that these different crime and abuse types intersect and are affecting children at alarming rates today. But we know that these protections, and we serve as a safety net, are provided after the damage has been done. So we have a bulwark where we've got prevention with research and education at the front end so that we can arm children with the skills they need to learn about the 4 R's of the digital age: respect, resilience, critical reasoning skills, and responsibilities. So that we can prepare them for the world of the future, working with children to co-design content that resonates with them and is authentic on the platforms that they use and inhabit. We bolster that further by what I call proactive and systemic change. And this is where we're shifting the responsibility for online safety and user empowerment back on the platforms themselves. It is the technology companies that have built the services in which the hosting of illegal and harmful content can be proliferating online. We need them to be erecting the digital guardrails and embedding the virtual seatbelts to keep all users, but particularly children, safer online. We've been working for 4 years with the industry to develop the Safety by Design initiative, which encourages the companies to assess risk at the front end and build in safety protections at the get-go, rather than retrofitting after the damage has been done. And we encourage them to use innovation and investment to do so. It just makes good business sense. But it's also the only way that we're going to make the online world safer. And we need to be thinking about the Web3 world and the metaverse and learning lessons about safety and how children are being exploited in today's world. If we're not building safety into this next generation where children are going to be having hyper-realistic and high sensory experiences, how are we going to protect them and alleviate the harm in the future? We need to be future focused. We need companies today using technologies that are readily available like PhotoDNA and Project Artemis. And currently, we don't have a sense of how broadly those technologies are being used. Australia has drawn a line. We've updated our Online Safety Act that's been in implementation since January of 2022. We will soon be rolling out our mandatory industry codes, which will require 8 sectors of the technology industry to proactively detect and remove child sexual exploitation material. We will also require them to follow basic online safety expectations to keep Australian and other users safe, and will be able to compel transparency and accountability. We need to work together across sectors, but across the globe to make sure that we're on the same trajectory and working together to keep children safer online. You can find more information about who we are and what we do at esafety.gov.au.
Monsieur le directeur exécutif du Partenariat mondial de lutte contre les violences à l'encontre des enfants, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des pays membres du Partenariat mondial, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais à l'entame de mes propos vous adresser les salutations des enfants de Guinée qui participent avec moi à cette communication depuis le sud du pays. Je vous adresse également les vifs remerciements et les félicitations de son Excellence Monsieur le Président de la Transition, Président du CNRD, le colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, au Partenariat mondial, pour avoir donné une orientation stratégique à travers le monde sur la lutte contre les violences faites aux enfants. Je me réjouis de la participation de mon pays à cette importante rencontre virtuelle qui traduit toute l'importance dévolue aux avancées significatives qu'a connues la Guinée ces dernières années en matière de promotion et de protection de l'enfance en général, mais surtout sur la problématique récurrente des violences à l'encontre des enfants dans les familles, dans les institutions et les espaces ouverts. Mesdames et Messieurs, la Guinée fait partie des 27 premiers pays à adhérer au partenariat mondial. En 2019, la loi portant code de l'enfant guinéen, qui interdit strictement les châtiments corporels dans les dispositions des articles 767 et 772, a été révisée. Cette révision a engendré des évolutions majeures dans les domaines de la promotion de l'abandon du mariage d'enfants, la protection judiciaire des enfants, le renforcement des dispositifs communautaires et des services. Il me plaît aussi de signaler que notre pays a engagé des actions qui ont débouché sur les résultats suivants. L'élaboration d'une feuille de route nationale, la signature par moi-même, chef du gouvernement, d'un document autour des 5 engagements solennels sous la forme d'aspiration nationale pour donner une orientation aux services compétents afin de faire de la lutte contre les violences faites aux enfants une priorité. La vulgarisation du document d'engagement du gouvernement sur les violences faites aux enfants et au niveau national et dans les régions et préfectures du pays. La réalisation d'une enquête sur les déterminants des violences dans différents milieux. Les 10 engagements portent essentiellement sur l'application des dispositions du Code de l'enfant relatives aux violences physiques, notamment l'interdiction des châtiments corporels en famille, dans les communautés et à l'école. La réduction du taux de mariage d'enfants de 20% d'ici 2025, l'application du cadre légal relatif aux mutilations génitales féminines, l'accroissement des investissements en faveur des enfants dans les secteurs sociaux prioritaires, le renforcement de la protection des enfants dans l'utilisation de l'Internet, des plateformes, réseaux, produits et services numériques. Monsieur le directeur exécutif du Partenariat mondial pour l'enfance, Mesdames et Messieurs, le gouvernement de transition que j'ai l'honneur de diriger fait de la problématique des violences faites aux enfants une des questions centrales de la lettre de mission que j'ai adressée à Madame la ministre en charge de l'enfance dès sa prise de fonction. Ainsi, conformément à ces orientations et dans la perspective d'offrir un environnement sûr et protecteur aux personnes vulnérables, notamment les enfants, les directives claires s'articulant sur 4 dimensions ont été données à ce département. Il s'agit de l'amélioration de l'offre de services à travers le système de protection de l'enfant en assurant la prise en charge holistique des enfants ayant des besoins spécifiques d'accompagnement. La mise en œuvre des actions donnant effet aux aspirations contenues dans la lettre d'engagement que j'ai moi-même signée pour le compte du gouvernement guinéen. La réalisation des actions d'évaluation et de recherche sur les violences à l'encontre des enfants. La vulgarisation des textes juridiques, notamment la loi portant code de l'enfant. Mesdames et messieurs, je puis vous assurer de mon engagement personnel et celui de mon gouvernement sous la clairvoyance et l'impulsion de son Excellence Monsieur le Président de la Transition à œuvrer dans une dynamique sans relâche en vue de mettre fin aux violences faites aux enfants. Je voudrais pour terminer mes propos renouveler mes remerciements au partenariat mondial et l'UNICEF pour leurs efforts d'appui aux institutions nationales en charge de l'enfance. Vive les enfants du monde, vive la coopération, je vous remercie.
What we have just heard should give all of us a sense of hope and a sense of what we can achieve with and for children when backed by political and leadership commitment at the highest level. Change happens from Australia to Zambia, from the European Union to Guinea. We've seen concrete examples of policies and programs preventing and responding to all forms of violence against children. But we also heard Medina's first-hand experience of the unacceptable reality of violence being normalised and the need for greater efforts to create and support child-led platforms. We heard Haruna's call for more to be done to ensure that international conventions aimed at protecting children from armed conflict are actually enforced. This is why the final part of today's programme is so important. The Brave Movement, a powerful new global survivor-centred movement to end child sexual violence, will present a clear set of demands. We will also hear the powerful testimony of actor and activist Samantha Morton, herself a survivor of violence in childhood. And the End Violence Partnership's board co-chair, Joy Pamathi, will inspire us to work together with a renewed sense of urgency, and she will outline a compelling call to action to leaders everywhere. But before we hear from any of them, it's my great pleasure to introduce Rachel McLean, the UK Minister for Safeguarding, to talk about why confronting the threat of sexual exploitation and abuse of children is a major priority for the UK government, and what they're doing to tackle it.
The fight against child sexual exploitation and abuse is one of the most important and pressing issues of our time. Confronting this threat is a major priority for the UK government, and particularly for me in my role as Minister for Safeguarding. And so I'm pleased to be able to offer some reflections at today's Leaders Summit. The End Violence Against Children Partnership does a huge amount of vitally important work across the world, and as its primary donor, the UK is a proud supporter of that work. Victims of these crimes are forced to endure unspeakable horrors, and the impact on them can be devastating and long-lasting. In my role, I have the great privilege of speaking directly with victims and survivors, hearing their testimonies and insights, and I am determined to ensure their experiences drive our efforts to tackle child sexual exploitation and abuse, prevent further offending, and ensure that perpetrators are brought to justice. The UK is proud to be a world leader in this effort, with our approach underpinned by the Tackling Child Sexual Abuse Strategy, which was published last year. And together with a robust national response, we are an active participant when it comes to international cooperation and global standards. This is absolutely vital. These issues are too significant and too complex for any one country or one sector to address them in isolation. We've driven forward important work with 5 country partners and used our G7 presidency last year to stress the importance of collective action, as well as the work of the End Violence Partnership. But there is much more to do, and it's essential that we continue to seize every opportunity to mobilise further international action, such as the upcoming G7 meetings. We need to take a stand together and act right now to ensure that children all over the world are kept safe. And these efforts need to be supported by robust domestic regulatory measures in countries right around the world. The UK government's online safety bill will place tech companies under a statutory duty to keep users safe on their platforms. Companies will be held to account by an independent regulator. We must also continue championing strengthened collective global standards. These include calling on tech companies to play their part in keeping children safe online, including by implementing the global voluntary principles and reporting on progress in a transparent and accountable way. This is particularly vital as we witness the emergence of technologies such as end-to-end encryption. While we in the UK support strong encryption and protecting privacy, we are clear that companies must only introduce these features in a way that does not compromise on the safety of children. I cannot stress enough, there is no greater transgression of privacy than a child being subject to sexual abuse, and this abuse being circulated online for the gratification of offenders. We need to continue to support initiatives like the End Violence Partnership. And doing so means we are investing in work that makes a real difference across over 70 countries. This includes projects that have engaged over 900,000 children and 75,000 caregivers in digital education initiatives, and the establishment of new portals for reporting child sex abuse material in 32 countries, and incredible reach and engagement with other government and industry partners. It is therefore my pleasure to be able to announce that over the next 3 years, the UK Government's Home Office will contribute a further £16.5 million to the End Violence Partnership. As we strive to protect this generation and future generations of children from violence and abuse, the End Violence Partnership will continue playing a hugely important role. And that's clearly recognised by the UK's continued support, and I would encourage other countries and investors to do the same. Thank you.
As of January of 2020, 44% of the entire internet users in the United States said that they had experienced online harassment. Now, that is just one statistic out of many of how cyberbullying affects people every day, every month, every year. Now, what is the real reason behind cyberbullying? And it's very difficult to pinpoint just one. But the biggest one is that teenagers ask for freedom on applications. They ask to be able to have their social media life be separate from their real life. And beyond that, there's a lack of monitoring on social media tools and much more unmoderated content as we see it go every single day. But what else does social media lead to? What does cyberbullying lead to? And the biggest ones is issues that are even worse than just simple harassment. This could lead to mental health issues or even suicide. For me personally, I experienced cyberbullying at the age of 10 or 11 years old. I'd seen my friends experience cyberbullying. It's something that everyone has seen at one point in their life, even if they hadn't experienced it. And whether it's a simple insult or whether it's a real issue, it hurts everyone in a different way. And that's why I wanted to create something that could help tackle the root problem, allow teenagers to be self-aware and help them recognize that they want to stop bullying other people. So to do that, I created the first ever non-punitive anti-cyberbullying tool called Kindly. It's built on an artificial intelligence algorithm, more specifically machine learning algorithm, to detect words or phrases that may be considered bullying. I trained it with a bank of words, but it's growing ever since. And speaking of a bank of words, since one person can't solve the world's entire cyberbullying problem, I made it available on the Kindly landing page for students to be able to go in and add their own words and phrases and train the AI model so that they have an opportunity to be a part of the solution. Now, in partnership with UNICEF, we hope to bring Kindly to this place where everyone can use it. And it's a tool that everyone feels comfortable using as well. Now, saying all of that, our generation is growing up in a place where we're seeing problems that have never existed before, and cyberbullying is one of the big ones. The only thing that's going to change our world for the better is the co-creation of teenagers hand in hand looking to make the internet a better place. Because we need to start creating solutions by teenagers for teenagers. Thanks for your time.
Hello, I'm Mick Sheldrick, co-founder and chief policy officer of Global Citizen. Injustices don't just happen by accident. They occur by design, and they're allowed to persist through neglect. We also know that injustice is intersectional, but its impacts are uneven, and too often women and girls face the most compounding challenges as a result of poverty, injustice, lack of opportunity, and systemic barriers. This is not an accident of the system we live in. It is a direct result of it. Nelson Mandela said it best: like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. And he said, overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. But here's the thing. It is also an act of common sense. The crisis of human suffering, including gender inequality and gender-based violence, is allowed to persist despite having the solutions and resources at hand to fix it. The international community could fix inequalities, but it chooses not to. As we've seen in Ukraine with reports of trafficking, as in crises around the world, we see and hear too many reports and incidences of child exploitation and sexual abuse. That's why we support new investments for those campaigners and activists on the front lines, standing up for children and survivors of sexual violence. For Global Citizen and for global citizens around the world, this moment of crisis demands new urgency, a renewal of purpose, and the ability to move millions of people to respond with pace, using the tools already in hand, building on goals we already have, but fixing what's broken and adding new ways to achieve them. Global Citizen is working to empower women and young girls right now. Perhaps the most vulnerable and undervalued global cohort, young women and girls are also the ones with the most potential for transformative change if empowered, because it is girls with proper access to education, nutrition, healthcare, and family planning who will lift up their communities and end the cycle of poverty for all of us. Working to address gender equity through an intersectional lens that includes climate, economic, and social justice is a moral duty, and it is enlightened self-interest. Because today, what happens to young women and girls has direct and immediate effects on all of us. From the health of our family to the health of the planet, we have seen time and again that we can only succeed together. Our generation can create a fairer and more prosperous world, and I believe there are good reasons for this optimism, because we know how to do it. We know what it takes, helping people obtain adequate nutrition, clean water, basic healthcare, education, especially for girls, adequate income, and access to economic opportunities through trade. We need to actively defend advocacy, activists, and human rights defenders, as well as to promote real access to justice for all and reinvigorate trust in institutions. Each of us is interconnected. Each of us is part of our world. Each of us has a responsibility to take action now.
Hi, my name is Dr. Paul Zeitz. I'm the Brave Movement Executive Coordinator. I'm honored to be here today with co-founders Tabitha Mamira and Wipke Mueller. Tabitha is a mental health professional and expert, and she is also a member of our SAGE, our Survivor Advocates Globally Empowered. Wipke Mueller is a political scientist based in Germany, and she is the co-chair of our G7 Survivors Mobilization Task Force. Welcome, friends. Over to you, Tabitha. Can you share with us why you're so excited about the Brave movement?
Yes, I started without telling anybody about my experience as a survivor until I ran into this 5-year-old girl who had been assaulted by a grandfather who was HIV positive. And because she lacked $5, she couldn't get the help she needed. And today, she faced a whole life of this. And they were my power. They gave me the courage to speak up as a survivor. The Brave movement gave us the platform as survivors to be part of changing this world. Prevention, healing, and justice are key to changing the world. It's easier to build strong children than repair adults, as Frederick Douglass said. So it's our calling today that we can change child sexual violence once and for all.
Over to you, Wipke. Our movement is mobilizing around the world, in Africa, Latin America, Asia, the Americas, and in Europe. Can you give us a sense of what's happening as Germany is leading the G7 this year?
Thank you so much, Paul. It's my honor to speak today at this summit, and I'm so excited to be invited. Thank you. So I'm a survivor of childhood sexual violence in my family as well, and I'm also a member of the Survivors Council in Germany. That is an advisory board linked to the government to inform policy and practice, because it's very important that survivors' expertise informs all policy. And Germany has G7 presidency this year, and this is why we decided in the Brave movement that we need to do some survivor-centered advocacy around the G7. We established a G7 Survivors Task Force in the movement with survivors from G7 countries and allies, and beyond the G7 countries. And our goal is to gain the support of the G7 heads of state, because childhood sexual violence is a global issue that belongs on a global agenda. And the G7 have special responsibility to take the lead, because they are the richest countries in the world. And what is decided on G7 level has huge impact on all other countries in the world. And we have had conversations with several Sherpa teams in G7 countries, and the German Sherpa State Secretary Jörg Kukies has written a letter to us stating that Germany would take on the issue within the G7 presidency, and that they work on expanding international cooperation on the issue. And this is what we really need.
So our voices are finally being heard. We have a seat at the table at last. So Tabitha, can you share with us, what are our demands? What are we calling for? And Wipke, if you could follow up after Tabitha.
Yes. First and foremost, we're calling on all of you to be brave with us so children can be safe. And the 4 things we're asking for in their all call to action: justice, investment, safety, and inclusion. There should be no deadline on accountability of perpetrators. A survivor should be able to report at any time. We need to abolish statutes of limitations. We need to invest and put our money where our mouth is, because what we're not changing, we're choosing. And we can't change anything without putting resources toward prevention, healing, and justice. Safety, that should not be a privilege. Every child should have a right to safety at home, in schools, in places of worship. That is a right of every child to grow up feeling safe. And lastly, inclusion. Let us include survivor voices. Nothing should be done for us without us. Policy making and decision making should be centered around the voices of survivors. Thank you.
Wipke?
Thank you. Thank you, Tabitha. I totally agree that for too long, childhood violence has been tackled as a technical issue, but it's a political issue that belongs on a global agenda. And we started a G7 petition that you can sign on change.org. It's our Be Brave petition, and already tens of thousands of people all across the world have signed this petition. And we have issued a G7 call to action that your organization can endorse, and you can find it on our website. And we demand that G7 countries invest billions to scale up prevention, healing, and justice programs in low-income countries. And then we want the G7 to establish G7 Survivors Councils, and we want G7 countries to develop and implement national action plans and strategies in G7 countries. Also, we have drafted G7 communique language that we already disseminated to Sherpas and to ministers. And the G7 summit in Bavaria will take place in only 2 weeks. And of course, we hope that decision makers will be brave with us and commit to bold and transformative action to end childhood sexual violence.
We are gathering and inviting all survivors and allies to join us in this quest to end childhood sexual violence. Ready? Be brave.
Be brave.
Today, we find ourselves at a critical juncture in the fight to tackle violence against children, including sexual exploitation and abuse. So I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you. I'm also extremely grateful to the victims and survivors of abuse for their bravery in sharing their testimonies with us. The End Violence Against Children Partnership has been working hard to coordinate global action to support children and communities around the world, striving to ensure children have a right to live in our communities, attend school, and use the internet free from all types of exploitation and abuse. But due to our fast-moving digitizing world, distressingly, online child sexual exploitation continues to grow rapidly, where it is estimated that 1 in 3 internet users is a child, and there are 750,000 adults trying to connect with children for sexual purposes at any one time. Therefore, governments, law enforcement industry, civil society, and indeed all of us must play our parts in keeping children safe. We must redouble our efforts as a matter of urgency. Robust common global standards and appropriate legislative and regulatory responses are needed to tackle this horrific yet inherently preventable crime. We must build upon existing solutions and collaborate to devise new and innovative approaches to tackle this complex and evolving threat, particularly as new technologies emerge. It is crucial that child safety is prioritized in tech companies' design choices. Lending our support to organizations such as the End Violence Against Children Partnership will drive forward further important work, and I urge you all to continue to use your platforms and offer your support and investment to this cause. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Samantha Morton. I'm an actor and a filmmaker, but I'm speaking to you today as a mother and a survivor of childhood neglect, violence, and trauma. I was born in 1977 to working-class parents in Nottingham, England, a city reeling from the collapse of industry and high levels of unemployment. I know I'm not alone in my experiences, so I apologise in advance if any of my story triggers anything for anyone listening. From only a few months old, and through no fault of my own, I was placed into the care of the state, a situation that continued throughout my childhood. My life was either spent in children's homes, with foster families, or in homeless hostels. Throughout all of this was the experience of violence, physical violence, sexual violence, and emotional violence, and all this from the adults who should have been protecting me, and in the places I should have been safe. The inconsistency of the support structures around me and my anger issues with the system meant I fell behind with my education and was excluded from school as a young teenager. When I was small, I understood that the people who harmed me did so because they didn't know any better. I hold no grudges, but from a young age I vowed to channel my experience for good, to make a difference, and that is why I'm here today. I remain certain that if people are given the right support and education, they can make better choices. I have been left with a life sentence of PTSD. I've had to learn to live with the constant re-emergence of childhood trauma. I'm fortunate enough that my job affords me the financial means to seek help and to be able to look after myself and my family. Many of the people I knew growing up have not been so fortunate. Some have died young or are in prison. Some are drug addicts, and most have no education and therefore are not able to contribute to society in a way that they would have hoped. I was lucky. A teacher at school spotted a talent in me and suggested I join a drama group. The leader of that group gave me the encouragement I needed. He gave me a focus and a determination to survive, to succeed, and to not become another statistic. Drama helped me to channel my experience into something productive and gave me the life I live and I love today. My 13-year-old self could only have dreamed that I would be here today, that I would be speaking to an esteemed audience such as yourselves as a champion for children. When adults hit children, this abuse of power and physical force is so fundamentally wrong. Right now, there are 1 billion children facing those same battles I faced, living their days in fear, spending their nights in the hope of making it through to the morning. No issue means more to me than ending all violence against children. It is impossible for me to imagine any other issue that it so viscerally affects our most vulnerable and most promising citizens, yet generates so little public outrage and such limited political traction. It seems only when a fatality happens, when a child dies at the hands of their abuser, that public and political opinion swell. only to die down a short time later once the dust settles and with no real change. In my lifetime, I want to see children afforded the same legal protection from assault as adults. I want to see England follow in the footsteps of the 67 countries worldwide, including our neighbouring nations, Scotland and Wales, to make it illegal to physically discipline a child. The status quo is utterly unacceptable. Parenting support can have powerful, lifelong impacts on children's development, and therefore the development of societies. But it is rarely prioritised in national budgets and policies. If we are to end violence against children, we need to educate parents and caregivers. The stresses of poverty, such as those suffered by the adults in my childhood and their parents before them, can and often do lead to violence. We need drastic and urgent action to stop the culture of violence against children and break this cycle. In the words of the iconic Maya Angelou, herself a survivor of extreme violence and adversity in childhood, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. 1 billion children affected. 1 billion futures hanging in the balance. Almost half the children on the planet, and that means half the children on the school bus, half the children in the nursery, half the children in the classroom are subject to this entirely preventable issue. We can, and we must prevent violence against children. The consequences of not doing so are infinitely harder than the challenges of tackling this issue head on. Every one of us speaking at this event and listening online knows this fact. Most of us are already working on fixing the problem. So, we need to change the conversation. We need to not only talk to people that are interested in the issue, but those who are influential in positioning it as the policy priority it deserves to be. Now is the time, for the very first time, to bring all governments of the world together for a direct and deliberate dialogue on ending violence against children. Believe me, I understand how hard it is to talk about this, but we have to, and we must place survivors at the centre of the movement. We have to raise the alarm and the expectation of greater government action at the same time as normalising the conversation in our communities. Close your eyes. Take yourself back to being 5 years old. Now imagine a grown-up hitting you with full force and how that would feel. Terrifying. The pain, the bruising can last for weeks. The scars can last a lifetime. Now, if you feel the way that I do, that this is fundamentally wrong, join me in speaking up to those in power, and together, let's put an end to violence against children. Thank you for listening to my story. And let's continue to listen and to talk to children, to survivors, and to each other. Be assured, I will continue to support the World Health Organization and the broader movement to end violence against children.
As we have heard today, we are living through a turbulent time for humanity. The world is grappling with simultaneous crises, including COVID-19, climate change, multiple conflicts, sharp increases in the cost of living, and shortages of food and other essential commodities. Some of these crises are interrelated. All of them put children at greater risk of violence, abuse, and exploitation. Around the world, 1 out of 2 children have experienced violence in the last year, whether it be at home, at school, online, or in their communities. As today's speakers have so powerfully shared, this violence takes place in every country and community, in all cultural and socio-economic contexts, in peaceful settings, and in conflict. Violence against children is a silent epidemic that does not discriminate, and it often has devastating consequences for all of the 1 billion children directly impacted each year, and for their family, community, society, and economy. But times of such challenge and change can also be times of opportunity. We know what works to end violence against children, and together we are a part of the solution. Together to End Violence campaign has brought together governments, faith leaders, the UN, civil society, the private sector, young people, and adult survivors of child violence with one clear message. The time for action is now. Building on years of tireless effort and progress by so many individuals and organizations, the movement to end violence against children is growing stronger. We are yet to reach the tipping point, but we are getting nearer. Today's Leaders event marks an opportunity, an important moment in our collective efforts to transform commitment into actions to deliver a coherent and concerted response to end all violence and abuse of children. We have heard the case for action, and it is clear. We know that violence against children is wrong. We know that it undermines all other investments in their health, in their education, in their development, and in their self-actualization. We know what works to stop it, and that our actions must be informed by listening to and working with young people and with adult survivors of sexual violence and abuse. And we know that it makes economic sense to prevent it. So the case for action to end violence against children is clear, and the time for action is now. Challenging times such as these require ambitious leadership and transformative action to overcome the challenges that children face. Informed by evidence, including the INSPIRE strategies, and guided by the Together to End Violence policy proposals, we call all leaders everywhere to make sure that all forms of violence against children are legally unacceptable and banned, to provide parents and caregivers with the information, the services, and the support that they need, to make schools safe, non-violent, and inclusive, to make the internet safe for children, and to unlock the domestic and international funds needed to invest in prevention and response programs that keep children safe from all forms of violence. Violence against children can no longer be ignored. We can and must end the pain and suffering that too many children around the world have experienced for far too long, so that it will not be experienced by any of the future generations. The End Violence Partnership and community are well positioned to build on the foundations laid, the awareness raised, and the momentum generated by all of us in recent years. Together, we must co-create new opportunities to accelerate evidence-based action to prevent and respond to child violence. And in doing so, reimagine and shape a much more just, a much more inclusive, and a much more peaceful society for all children. Let's seize this moment with and for our children. Thank you.
Well, if there was any doubt that we must do more to end violence against children, there should be no doubt now. We just witnessed an incredibly moving personal journey, along with tangible calls and a persuasive case for action. Today, we've seen and heard that measurable progress is happening, but it's not happening fast enough or at the scale that's needed. There's an urgent need to strengthen political will, to move this issue higher up the international development agenda, and to attract much-needed domestic and international investment. Ending violence against children is the right thing to do for every child. It is a smart investment to make, and it's possible. Collectively, we have made huge progress over recent years, building on decades of work and progress and learning by so many individuals and organizations. Ending violence against children is gaining traction as a global issue, with a wide range of stakeholders taking collective action like never before. I'm confident that we are all better informed, but also inspired to do more. so that every child can grow up safe at home, safe at school, safe online, and safe in their community. So let's do this with a renewed sense of urgency and ambition, building on the momentum that we have co-created. Let's be bold. Let's press for a step change in the political and the financial commitments needed to end all violence and abuse of children. Finally, a very big thank you to each and every one of our inspiring Together to End Violence advocates, to all participants for all that you do every day to make the world a safer place for children, and to our 750 partners globally who are relentlessly working so that every girl and every boy can grow up in a safe, secure, and nurturing environment. Let's keep working together because we can and we will end violence against children.